Good morning and welcome to another episode of Geeks and Gurus. My name is Megan Bohomama here from Sumo Logic, and I'm super excited today to have two guests with us from the DevOps Institute. We have Evelyn Orlick and Jane Grohl, and they are going to be talking about their latest research project, the inaugural 2022 SRE Pulse on the state of site reliability engineering and automation. But before we get into discussing the report, Jane and Evelyn, I would love for you guys to take a moment to introduce yourselves, what you do, and also, Jane, since you're leading up the DevOps Institute, if you could talk a little bit about the DevOps Institute and its mission and types of programs that it supports.
Thanks, Megan. Hey, Evelyn. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Grohl. I am CEO and one of the co-founders of DevOps Institute since about 2015. Prior to that, I was an IT ops person and very involved in the ITSM ITIL space before really getting engaged in DevOps around 2012. So I've had the privilege of kind of watching some of the evolution of these practices, and it's one of the reasons I'm so excited about this research. If you're not familiar with DevOps Institute, our mission is to advance and upskill the humans, DevOps, in a very technical landscape. We think that it is human transformation that's really going to drive digital transformation. And so we provide educational experiences and certifications around key topics of DevOps and now SRE. We have two certifications specifically around SRE that were launched in the last 18 months. We also do an extensive amount of research. Evelyn will introduce herself as our director of research. We do an annual upskilling report that we've been doing for 4 years, and this year is our inaugural SRE Pulse. So I'm very excited to talk a lot about what we found from this important community research project. Evelyn, how about you?
Yeah, well, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Jane. I don't think I've been on a event where I was called a geek or a guru, so this is quite exciting. I'm called a lot of other things, but I won't repeat that here. As Jane said, I'm Chief Research Officer at the DevOps Institute and excited to be here in this session. My passion is research. I'm a former analyst at Forrester Research. I've spent many, many years there. I'm still an industry analyst in my second job. I don't have one job, I have two jobs. So, and site reliability engineering is something quite close to my heart because, as Jane said, I'm an IT ops person myself. And that's actually how we met. When Jane was doing a lot of work in ITSM, she and I met and did a lot of things together, traveling in fun places like Florida, for example.
Lots of travel to Florida for all of us, I'm sure. Yes, that's great. And Evelyn, anything else? I'm sorry, anything else you want to say about your work at DevOps Institute?
Yeah, so I do a lot of the research, understanding of what are the trends, what's happening. The upskilling report is one of the projects I've been doing. I also do and work with the ambassadors in the skill books, which is again research relative to the different topics, be it leadership, DevSecOps, DevOps, journeys, site reliability, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm located in Germany.
Awesome. Yeah, it would be great if you guys could also maybe share just is it DevOps Institute what is your address? .com. Okay, yep. DevOpsinstitute.com in case people want to
membership. Sorry, Megan. Membership is free at DevOps Institute. So I invite anyone to go up and join our community. There's a lot of resources. We do a monthly Skill Up Day event, as well as webinars and, of course, our important research. So go up to the website, become a member. Again, you have access to a lot of resources.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, with that, I think we'll start the discussion. You guys have already talked about community and SRE. I know for Sumo Logic, SRE makes up such a big instance or such a big, significant portion of our customers and people who work with our product. And I'm wondering, why did you guys decide to take on a new report in addition to the skill up work you do around SRE?
So I've been watching SRE, as Evelyn said. She and I both have spent some time in the IT service management space. from the early days of ITIL, and really discovered SRE probably about 5 years ago. Read the SRE book, went to an SRE con, and saw the emergence of something kind of new and exciting for IT operations. And so, in the early days of DevOps, there was conversation about no ops, and DevOps kind of ended at deployment and then started the cycle all over again. And people like the three of us would stand up and go, well, what happens now? Like, what happens after the product goes into production? And there didn't seem to be a fit there. And then SRE, again, kind of grew up very organically, not as part of the DevOps, the original DevOps principles, but it kind of filled the gap in terms of not only IT operations from an infrastructure perspective, but from post-production and a lot of the same ITSM practices like incident management or change management, capacity, and then certainly event, which evolved into observability. So I've had a personal fascination with SRE from its earlier days. I had a chance to spend some time with some of the Google folks and talk about what they're doing. But the upskilling report is our big flagship report that we do every year, that we look at which skills are considered must have, nice to have, or not as important. And Evelyn and I and the community have really seen a growth in SRE year over year since we started the report, where SRE was just accelerating very quickly as a must-have practice. And so I turned to Evelyn and said, suppose we did a second research project where we specifically looked at the state of SRE and see how it's being adopted. What is the community telling us? We're all thought leaders, so we tell the community a lot of things. Let's see what the community is telling us about the adoption of SRE. And, I love Evelyn Ehrlich more than anything because I come up with these passion projects and she goes, yeah, sure, we could do that. And so she took the baton, moved forward. And of course, we're very grateful to Sumo Logic and our other sponsors for supporting it, because it is community input, and then we can, apply an analysis to it and then provide it back to the community.
Yeah, I think it's really different that way in other research subjects or other research projects that I've been involved in, where you sort of source, different people to participate. You guys were really reaching out directly to the community you work with. And I mean, for us, that's what makes it exciting, to hear from those people who are very involved and invested in the site reliability engineering work.
So just to add quickly,
Yeah.
what to Jane's comment, when she mentioned and said, let's do this, I was actually, yes, let's do that, because we saw an incredible increase on SRE adoption. I just looked at the numbers again. 2019, we had from the upskilling 10%. In 2022, 28% of SRE adoption. And then in 21, it went down a little bit because of everybody was busy with getting people into their home offices and things like that. We're at 21%, but still fairly high. And then I just did a check. I remember when Jane was saying that, should we do that? I was like, yes. At that time in the US, there were 170,000 SRE job openings, 50,000 in Europe, and 37,000 in Asia Pacific. So it was like, oh my gosh. And as an IT ops person who I, felt like at the time when I did that job in 94, that was such a boring job. I thought, this is the time to give meaning to all of these IT ops people out there. And I think that's really the most exciting thing about it.
Yeah, that's so funny. You mentioned boring, and maybe it was as IT ops, but I've never thought of SRE as boring. It seems super dynamic role to be playing, and we definitely saw that in the research. So I'll ask you, Evelyn, as you were doing the research, I mean, it sounds like maybe you were a little bit like at the numbers, the growth of SRE was a little bit surprising as you guys have gone through the research for, many years with the Skill Up reports. But what was there anything in particular that really surprised you, Evelyn, or you, Jane, as you were getting the research in from the SRE Pulse report?
Pleasant surprises or unpleasant surprises? I can offer both. Let's start with the pleasant surprises, because those are the ones which I like to spread optimism, right? So one which I found fantastic was that the activities of these folks who are actually doing SRE included knowledge management. And Jane, you'll love this, because how many years have we preached that you need to document and manage your knowledge and left shift it from level 3 to level 2 to level 1, right? That's the old language. But that was, for me, a most amazing, was like, hallelujah, that is fantastic. So that was a pleasant surprise. A unpleasant surprise to me was that toil, which is a topic of, right, what is happening in the waste, or what is kind of slowing things down, that there still wasn't as much of management of toil in across the entire team. There was some, so 66% said that they manage and measure toil in some teams, but only 11% managed it everywhere. So I think that one was a little bit of a disappointing fact. Jane, anything you thought?
Yeah, same as you. The positive and the surprise on perhaps not the most positive. On the positive side, 62% of the respondents said that they are doing something about SRE in their organization. The majority of which were doing it on a team or a product level, which is not a surprise. We saw that in DevOps as well, where scale will become probably the next big challenge. Big focus on reliability, focus on security. Incident management, right? The ability to really look at how incidents are managed and adopting some of that as well, I thought was really exciting. On the disappointing side, and perhaps we'll see more of this next year because this year is a benchmark for us, is we didn't see a lot of SLO. Right? We didn't see a lot of organizations that were saying, hey, we've established service level objectives and service level indicators, and we're managing as an entire organization against those shared service level objectives. That, and we saw this in ITSM as well, right? That they would start with incident management, change management, and 2 years later, they would look at service levels. And I've always hoped that we would flip that model, that you would identify your service levels first, and then you would manage your MTTR, you would manage your observability, you would manage that to make sure that you're meeting that. So it sounds like some of that pattern has continued. I really do hope we flip it so that organization, and it's hard to identify your service level objectives, right? There's a lot of input, in terms of what that actually looks like and how do you measure it collectively. But I would like to see more of that next year. Same thing with toil.
Yeah, and did you get a sense of why the service level objectives, like why they are still sort of at a nascent state, even though it's been something that's been talked about for a while? Do you have a feeling like that they need better tools, or it's just the practice and the process of putting them in place and following up? Did you get a sense of that at all?
Not really. We didn't, surveys are limited to amount of questions, right, before people bail out. But I can give you a little bit of my thoughts relative to the topic from inquiry and conversations with end customers. SLOs sometimes become difficulties because it's very difficult to find out where and how I define them, right? Where, in what band should I, for example, define them. I had once a conversation with a customer who said, well, 99.59 uptime, I want to move to that. And I asked, have you calculated how much that costs you to move from a 4.9 to a 5.9? Because that's a significant amount of money. And no, he has not. And he did not have the reasoning behind it from the end customer, meaning the business, why he wanted to do that. And so I think that's the challenge. Many organizations are not necessarily realizing where and how they need to communicate those and what does the business really want. They sometimes assume, and I think that's a mental muscle we've kind of started. It's difficult to lose that mental muscle of, we want to be perfect. We want to make it everything 5 nines. It doesn't matter if it's needed or not. And I think that's the beauty about the data as well. Organizations are seeing that there's the opportunity to plan out the SLOs and to really define the SLIs in such a way that they're meaningful, they can be measured, and they actually meet what the customer or those in the functions are needing. Because otherwise, we are working not with each other, we're working next to each other, and that's not the ultimate. That's not a good outcome.
Yeah.
And No, I was going to say, Megan, just to jump in on that, I also think we have a long history of having to reshape service level agreements. So,
Yeah.
we've been a very SLA focused
Mhm.
organization, whether it's from our vendors or to our customers. And we've always focused on MTTR, right? We've always focused that an SLA is how we'll respond to an incident. 2 hours, 4 hours to resolve on a priority one, instead of really looking at what a service level is and what an objective is. And then
Mhm.
how do we bring that instead of a single kind of legal piece of it, right? Like we execute an SLA and then, when something breaks, we weaponize it. How do we bring that SLO into an entire organization as a shared accountability that we're all going to hopefully achieve this? And SRE, I think, really kind of normalizes what a service level objective is, but there's a lot of kind of unlearning I think that organizations have to face to really think about what a service level is and then what a service level objective is and kind of take away that perception that it's only about when things break.
Yeah.
And so hopefully there's an evolution there.
Yeah, it's probably changing so much as, companies move to digital first, and it really becomes the business, the digital side of their business and maintaining those. So it's probably a whole slew of things that they can look at outside of what the SLA might encompass. Something you mentioned was, focusing on the human transformation, supporting a digital transformation. One of the surprises for me with the survey was to see how passionate SREs are about their jobs and how excited they are and seemingly fulfilled they are with their work. And I would love it if one of you could speak to what you saw in the survey and maybe share a little bit of the results and how SREs see their work, right as they're in the business.
Jane, you want to go first?
Well, I can talk about it from a human side, and then I'm hoping you'll share some of the data, the specific data. SRE, Evelyn said it before, right? I'm an old IT ops person, and we weren't on the top of the totem pole, and sometimes our work was very redundant and boring and frustrating because we were always waiting for something to come from the development teams, like on the other side of the fence, holding our hands up, right? Hoping that whatever change is coming, and so it was a very reactive role. It was a
Mm.
disconnected role. And SRE brought the engineering mentality to IT operations and also engages the role of the site reliability engineering into the dev teams, into the DevOps teams. So, first of all, there's a lot more respect, but there's also a lot more opportunity to improve that the proactive nature of reducing toil, that really being able to manage middle of the night on call, level 2, level 3 calls, kind of reinvigorated the role of IT operations. And also re-engage the role of IT operations as an engineer, right? Where everybody else, was calling themselves an engineer, and then in IT, we were not necessarily designated that way. So it is a technical role, but it is a very human role, and it is an engineering mentality that we are engineering support and we are engineering production. And I think that's really reinvigorated. Plus, now it's a very high-paying job that's in high demand, and nothing wrong with that, right? So that's good. Evelyn, what about the data? Like, there's some really significant data that came out of the survey.
Yeah, so there is, for example, over 85 or almost 85% said they expanded their skills and capabilities. So that's fantastic. Almost 90% said I'm much more engaged and excited about my work, which all of us are always looking for, getting excitement. And then another one, which really is fantastic also, is that they feel more valued as a team member. That's, again, over 70%. So those are just a few of the data points to really point out, as you said, Megan. SRE really energizes individuals and can accelerate the career. So if you feel like you're stuck where you are, or if you really want to make a change, as I heard.
Or if you want to make more money.
Yeah, or you
yeah.
which, that should be a reason, but shouldn't be the only one. Even so, my kids believe that that's the only reason to have a job. But again, that's very, 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 very exciting news. I think one more thing I want to point out is that diversity, as we know, this has been a topic everywhere across the world. And this is fantastic data. I strongly agree. 55% say that the workforce diversity is valued at our organization. So that's fantastic news as well. So it's not just a job of engineering, but it's, as Jane said, it's that human who gets energized and gets into a place where they feel valued, there's safety, there's collaboration, there's niceness, there's empathy, there's all those wonderful things which we've talked about over the years. It's actually right here in front of us with this SRE job, which is awesome. I wish I could be young again and go back and have my job in 94 and be an SRE. That would be really, really exciting, you know?
I know I think it's so exciting for people. I mean, I meet a lot of people in that role and they are always like pretty amazing people. And I think they have to play like so many, they not only have to be, experts in the technical realm, but they have to be able to, communicate with all the different parts of the business. So it's really impressive. And, I wish you could go back in time too, Evelyn, but you're serving an important role right now, what you're doing. A question though that has me a little bit concerned is, and Evelyn, I'll ask you, I'm wondering, because you brought this up, the amount of people that are interested in how the growth of SRE. Do you all see a shortage in skills? Because we're hearing about shortage in skill sets all over. And this is certainly a unique and diverse skill set that's required to support SRE. Like, do you see a gap coming up in the future? Is there a gap now from what both of you know?
Already there. It's a significant gap already. That's the number one challenge we found, and not not small gap. As I said, there's tons of jobs out there at different levels. So this is going to be a challenge, and to a call to action to anybody out there who is in leadership or in HR or in IT, whatever. Get your upskilling plan together, because this is going to be very important for your team to have the people inside and retain them and give them upskilling chances to be and become SREs. Jane, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that, this concept of no ops from years ago evolved into new ops, and new ops became SRE. But unfortunately, when, newer generations are entering into IT, they are wanting to enter in the dev role, right? So there's still a gap in dev, but ops wasn't as sexy. Perhaps as some of the other roles. So the first thing is, yes, there is a huge skills gap, and we know that, and the sourcing of talent or humans with this capability is obviously very limited. The good news is there's also opportunity to upskill anyone that's a systems administrator, infrastructure, support, post-production support level 2. Some software engineers are moving into SRE roles because it is an engineering role, and there is the ability to do development as an SRE. So again, we're seeing the opportunity for many that exist in the IT organization, some of whom may have been concerned about the future of their work or the future of their careers. They have an opportunity, and the organization has an opportunity to now upskill. And the other thing that, I would add just really briefly is, one of the cool things about SRE is, yes, it was born out of a series of books from Google, and that gave us the foundation. But SRE has also grafted other activities that have emerged since the release of those books. Observability, obviously Sumo Logic is very engaged in observability, which kind of evolved. Monitoring, still important, but to a shared thing. Chaos engineering, which again, we've been talking about for years, now suddenly kind of falls under the umbrella of SRE. And we're seeing more and more of these practices. So as an individual, you have an opportunity to really learn some cool stuff. And share that with the development teams and with the DevOps teams and others. So, new SREs, yes, that's one thing we need to make, this an appealing role for those entering the market. But existing IT professionals, regardless of where you are, this is a really, really fun space to be in right now. So hopefully that shortens or decreases the limited number of SREs that are out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. You made me think of one of our customers, SAP, who they went through a whole DevOps transformation and bringing people into SRE and then bringing them to observability. And they took a lot of their existing IT team and upskilled them, if you will, to help them take on the role of more of an SRE type role, more of a DevOps types
Yeah.
mindset. And I think only goodness, at least what I hear, only goodness came out of that. They were really everything we saw in the survey, very invigorated, very excited, and a lot of collaboration happening. So I hope that happens, and I hope a lot of teams are. I hope SRE is not. It's not too much of a shortage ahead of us. Because you guys brought up observability, I do want to talk about some of the tools and activities you saw that are important for SREs to adopt. What did you guys find in the survey? What are the important tools that are helping them support doing their job?
So Evelyn's going to let me go first because she knows, again, I'm a little passionate about it. So ITSM tools, right? The tools that organizations have been spending years implementing are still being used. And that's great. Hopefully they're being adapted, right? So how you manage incidents or how you record change or how you capture knowledge are still, those tools are still relevant. And for organizations, hopefully they're now even getting a better return on the investment. Again, as long as and we know these tools are adapting more to SRE and Agile and DevOps than they ever have before. So those tools are still in play. It's really where all the records are being captured and some of the flow is being managed. But we also know observability tools, security tools. Evelyn, do you want to speak specifically to the percentages of the data?
Not really, just for sake of time. I think you hit the nail on its head, as we say in Germany. ITSM, observability, monitoring and performance management tool. Just one thing to point out is that there is, to some extent, observability and monitoring in many, many teams. And there is, unfortunately, as you know, Megan, from Sumo Logic, there's tons and tons of vendors in this space, right? And the challenge for many of those enterprises is, how do we actually consolidate or bring all of this together so that we actually have the right amount of visibility and the right amount of data for insights so that we can actually make some decisions? And that's the million-dollar question ever since I entered into space, ever since I studied. And I think there is some guidance and some activities still to do. And Jane mentioned it. ROI is one thing to think about, right? If I invest in multiple tools, what is my ROI? I might need to kind of calm down and slow or box it into a few tools. But the other thing is also the amount of work I take and need to do to harvest all this data into one big data lake and get the end-to-end. Swivel chair correlation is still number one challenge across these tools, right? We used to talk about that, and it's still the case. And so, again, advice here for those who are listening: look at your tools and understand where actually can you bring things into simplification, because part of SRE is also to simplify in automation. And that means to kind of look at your tool sprawl and figure out where things you need to maybe let go and not buy another shiny object, which will give you some other insight.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think the economic climate is going to be pushing that even more these days?
Yeah, IT budgets, depending on if you're listening to Gartner or Forrester or IDC, if you add them all together and divide them by 3, the budgets in IT are growing 3%. That's nothing compared to, right? Everybody has to buckle down and figure out what to do. And there are different priorities at stake. And I think that's going to be the challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic. And, I know there have been lots of smaller teams have been growing and people get their own tools. But I think now in the current economic climate, the team's going to have to work together and decide what's really working for them and what's providing value.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering, with the report, how can teams leverage the report sort of on maybe they're already really practicing SRE, many are using SRE, but at different parts of the organization. Do you guys have recommendations for how they could leverage the report, which is meaty and dense, to maybe push their own understanding or their own adoption of SRE along?
Yeah, I think that the report, the mission of the report is to give in real life view of what's happening out there. And, and we had a healthy response to the survey. So, and we also had a very global response to the survey. So it isn't just one region or one company or a very small sampling. This was a very large sampling across the world in an open community research project. So hopefully on the highest level, teams will look at the report together, leaders will look at the report with their teams and talk about what they're doing compared to what they're seeing in the report, that they use it maybe not as a waypoint, but as some type of guidance that wherever you are in your journey, and I would suggest that many organizations are still at or just past the gate. SRE is still pretty new. And again, even looking at the data in terms of maturity, we're probably faster than we were with DevOps. But again, there's a journey ahead that I think organizations will do. The survey was crafted really well and is pretty deep data, as both of you know, having spent some time with it. It is free to download. So I also hope that, the market and the individual who's looking to grow their career or the leader in the organization or team leader will take this and really digest the content. And then, we always talk about adopt and adapt, right? There is no one way to do SRE. Right? There is no one path, but getting insight into what people are doing and where they are in the journey and what you're doing, I think, is important. Hopefully we'll be able to do this report for many years to come. And so this is the inaugural report, right? And so, next year we'll be able to see what the patterns are. One of the things we do with our reports is try to keep the questions close to, if not exactly the same, so that we can look year over year and see what the patterns and trends are. We've been able to do that with the upskilling report. So again, this is a starting point in terms of agnostic research, right? We're really proud of the fact that it is community driven, that it is agnostic. There's no agenda behind this research. And so hopefully next year we'll be able to see, okay, where did the trends take us?
Yeah, I mean, we were so excited, along with our partner AWS, to be part of the inaugural report. So I hope we'll be able to participate in future reports as well. I will ask you if that, we'll talk about future reports, but Evelyn, where do you see after this survey, do you get a little hint of the future of SRE and where it's going?
Yeah, I think it is recognized as right now a little bit of a best practice, and it's not yet as strong of a engineering function as it should be. So I think this report will help leadership and decision makers to really recognize that this SRE is not just a fad, it's actually an engineering function which is essential for whatever transformation you're doing. And so that's, I think, point one. And point two, I hope, and this is really a hope and a little bit of a prediction, that in the future we don't talk necessarily about the operations, the IT operations team in this ancient way we keep talking about it. And that, to me as an analyst, would be beautiful if at some point in time we have site reliability engineering and the job of site reliability engineers take over these functions of operations, really that next model of operating applications and services in the digital world. Why not, right? That would be my wish. And I think that's my prediction for next year. It will be much more than 62%. We've had over 150 downloads in just one day of the report. I'm blown away. This is fantastic. So we know that there are people out there who want to use the report and state and leverage that for their conversations with their leaders, which is great, or go into their team and they say, told you so, we're doing the right thing, here's a confirmation, and here are some challenges. And that's really kind of supporting, our journey. And I'm glad Jane started out with the idea. Sometimes you have to watch out when she has ideas. It's like, ooh, an idea. Ooh, do I want to dodge this bullet, or do I this one?
I'm all in. You thought
Yes.
this was right. That's awesome. I love it.
And by the way, as of this morning, I just got information over 300 downloads of the report in just a couple of days. So, please, if you're listening, go up to the website, download the report. It's really valuable and it's at no cost. It's really good data.
It really is, and it is there is a lot there to uncover and unpeel. So, with that, I will ask you all if you have any parting words, any parting thoughts about SRE, the report, anything that might be valuable for our audience. And we've covered a
So,
lot of ground here, but anything else?
yeah, Evelyn said SRE is here to stay. My hope and my wish is that this becomes the third piece of the software development lifecycle, and that someday we graduate to generally accepted IT principles. My husband's a CPA, so I'm pretty familiar with general accounting principles. But that if we put together and we evolve Agile, DevOps, and SRE together, and we take those practices and we really cross-pollinate them, then we are looking at a digital first environment as we move further into this new decade. So it's here to stay. And I really, really hope that individuals and organizations, accelerate their interest, not only in SRE, but in this kind of new self-organizing software development lifecycle.
Yeah, and I think it's so exciting what it can bring as a pivotal point between different parts of the organization, how it can maybe advance those relationships even with the business. So, a lot to come. And Evelyn, from your side, anything else you want to close with?
Yeah, I actually would like to just ask if anybody is out there who is willing to talk to me about their exciting SRE story or a failure and a pickup or something like that. I'd love to write a case study on that. I know Jane gives me lots of freedom as a chief research officer to write case studies. I'd love that type of work because I learn and everybody else learns. So reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. Megan, if you know somebody, happy to connect.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for your work on this and for sharing it with the world. We're excited for all the SREs out there to find out about their job and learn from this report themselves and then contribute. If they didn't, contribute to it next year and look for, I guess we're going to be doing another one. So we're excited for your work in that. So with that, I will conclude this Geeks and Gurus session. Thank you so much for joining Sumo Logic and for joining DevOps Institute for this particular moment. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you to Sumo Logic, really, for all of your support. We so appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun.